The massive doors of the Terran Federation Assembly Hall slid open with a deep, rumbling sound. Through them walked a creature that most humans had only seen in history books and war documentaries. Ambassador Cathver of the Zephyrian Empire moved slowly across the polished floor, his tall frame bent forward in a way that seemed wrong for his species. His skin, usually a proud silver color, had turned a dull gray. His large eyes darted nervously around the room. Park Min-ho sat in the chairman's seat at the front of the great hall. His face showed nothing as he watched the alien approach. Next to him, Defense Minister Kim Soo-jin leaned forward in her chair. Her dark eyes followed every step the Zephyrian took. Behind them, dozens of human officials filled the curved rows of seats. The silence in the room was thick and heavy. Cathver stopped in the center of the hall. For a long moment, he simply stood there. His breathing was loud in the quiet space. Then, slowly, he lowered himself to one knee. A gasp went through the human audience. No Zephyrian had ever knelt before another species in recorded history. Honored leaders of humanity, Cathver began. His voice came through the translation device in perfect human speech, but it shook with emotion. I come before you today, not as your equal, not as your enemy, but as one who begs for help. Chairman Park said nothing. He simply watched and waited. My people are dying, the ambassador continued. A terrible sickness spreads through our worlds. It kills our children. It kills our elders. It kills our strongest warriors and our wisest leaders. Our doctors cannot stop it. Our scientists have no answers. Every day, thousands more die. From the medical section, Dr. Lee Dong-wook studied the alien with professional interest. He had spent years learning about Zephyrian biology, not to help them, but to understand their weaknesses during the long wars. Now this knowledge might serve a different purpose. Cathver raised his head to look directly at Chairman Park. We know what your people think of us. We know the history between our species. But I also know that humans have the greatest medical knowledge in the galaxy. You have saved species that others gave up for dead. You have cured diseases that seemed impossible to cure. The ambassador's voice grew stronger as he spoke. The sickness that kills my people, ... It came from our own laboratories. We were making weapons to use against our enemies. The disease escaped. It spread faster than we could contain it. Now it destroys everything we built. Intelligence Officer Yoon Taemin made notes on his tablet. The irony was clear to everyone in the room. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, which had conquered 1,000 worlds, was being destroyed by its own creation. I know we have no right to ask for your help, Cathver said. I know what my people did during the wars. I know about the worlds we destroyed. I know about the lives we took. But I also know that you are better than we were. You do not kill innocent people just because you can. You do not destroy worlds for sport. Dr. Han So-young watched the ambassador carefully. She had studied Zephyrian behavior patterns for years. This one seemed genuinely afraid, but she could not tell if he was afraid for his people or afraid of what humans might do to them. We offer everything we have, Cathver continued. Our technology, our knowledge, our remaining wealth. We will give you access to our most secret military plans. We will surrender our weapons. We will do whatever you ask. Please, just save our children. The hall remained silent. Chairman Park's expression had not changed throughout the entire speech. Defense Minister Kim made a few notes, but said nothing. The other officials whispered quietly among themselves. Medical Director Lee stood up from his seat. Ambassador, you speak of your children dying. Do you remember the children of other worlds who died because of your people's actions? Cathver's skin grew even paler. Yes, I remember. Do you remember the children of Kepler 44-b, who were used as test subjects for your biological weapons? Dr. Lee's voice was calm but cold. Yes. Do you remember the families on Centauri Prime who were separated and sold as slaves? Yes. Do you remember broadcasting the screams of dying human children to break our morale during the siege of New Tokyo? Kethver lowered his head. Yes, I remember all of it. Chairman Park finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the hall. Your empire showed no mercy when others begged for it, Ambassador. Your people laughed when children cried for their parents. Your soldiers celebrated when cities burned. Why should we show mercy when you beg for it? The ambassador looked up with desperate eyes. Because you are what we never were. Because you are better than we were. Because even now, after everything we did, you have the power to be kind. Park Min-ho stood up slowly. The entire hall watched him. We will consider your request, Ambassador. You will have our answer soon. As Kethver was led from the hall, every human present understood the weight of the moment. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was now completely at their mercy. The next morning, the assembly hall filled with a different kind of tension. Ambassador Kethver sat alone in the center, surrounded by empty chairs. Above him, massive holographic displays waited in darkness. The human officials took their seats, quietly, their faces grim and determined. Dr. Choi Ji-woo walked to the center platform, carrying a small device. She had spent the night preparing this presentation, knowing it would be one of the most important moments in galactic history. Her hands trembled slightly as she activated the holographic systems. What you are about to see, she announced to the silent room, are official records from Zephyrian military databases. We recovered these files during our victory at the Battle of Proxima Station. The first image appeared above them. It showed a beautiful blue-green world from space. Cities sparkled like jewels across its surface. Kethver recognized it immediately and closed his eyes. Helix, Nebula Colony, Dr. Choi said simply. Population 43 million, mostly human families who had lived there for 3 generations. They grew food for the outer colonies. They had no military installations. The image changed. Now it showed the same world, but different. The cities were gone. Black craters marked where they had been. The oceans had turned dark with ash and debris. The Helix colony sent 17 surrender messages to the Zephyrian fleet. Dr. Choi continued. They offered to give up without fighting. They begged to evacuate their children first. The response was orbital bombardment of every major population center. Kethver opened his eyes and looked at the images. His breathing became faster and more shallow. Around the room, human officials watched his reactions carefully. Intelligence Officer Yoon Taemin stood up from his seat. Ambassador, do you remember giving the order for this attack? I was not in command then. I was only a junior officer. But you were present on the flagship. Our records show you transmitted the final attack confirmation. Kethver said nothing. The holographic display changed again. This time it showed the inside of what looked like a large warehouse. Hundreds of beings from different species stood in lines. They wore simple gray clothing and metal collars around their necks. Their eyes were empty and hopeless. The slave markets of Centauri Prime, Dr. Choi announced, operated by the Zephyrian Empire for 67 years. Conservative estimates place the number of beings sold here at over 400 million. The image zoomed in on individual faces. Humans, yes, but also the blue-skinned Arcturians, the insect-like Vespans, and dozens of other species. Children clung to their parents. Elderly beings sat on the ground, too weak to stand. Dr. Han So-young stood up from the medical section. We have detailed records of the medical experiments performed on these slaves. Zephyrian scientists tested new diseases on them. They wanted to see how different species would react to their biological weapons. They tested pain tolerance by slowly removing body parts, added Medical Director Lee. They studied fear responses by threatening children in front of their parents. They documented how long different species could survive without food or water. Kethver was shaking now. His silver skin had turned almost white. Please, he whispered. I know these things happened, but that was the old empire. Many of us were against these policies. Were you? Asked Chairman Park quietly. Before the ambassador could answer, the display changed again. This time it showed a Zephyrian officer standing in what looked like a broadcast studio. The officer was younger, but clearly recognizable as Kethfer. This broadcast was sent to human colonies during the siege of New Tokyo, Dr. Choi explained. It was meant to break human morale by showing them what happened to captured civilians. The younger Kethver on the screen began to speak. His words were translated at the bottom of the display. People of Earth, watch in despair. These are your children, crying for mercy that will never come. We will make them suffer as long as possible, just as we will make all of you suffer. The camera moved to show human children in cages. They were crying and calling for their parents. Some were clearly injured. All looked terrified and hopeless. The present-day Kethfer covered his face with his hands. I was following orders, he said weakly. I had no choice. There is always a choice, said Defense Minister Kim Soo-jin. She stood up and walked closer to the ambassador. You chose to broadcast the suffering of children. You chose to enjoy their pain. You chose to threaten their families. More images filled the air around them, burning cities, mass graves, laboratories where alien scientists performed horrible experiments on living beings, prison camps where millions died from hunger and disease. And in many of the images, the same faces appeared again and again, Zephyrian officers who were still alive, still in positions of power. The beings who ordered these atrocities, said Prosecutor Jang Minesio through a video link, are still alive. They still command your armies. They still make decisions for your empire. Emperor Vextar himself personally ordered the destruction of 17 different worlds. Kethver looked up at Chairman Park with desperate eyes. That was war. People do terrible things during war. Your own species has a history of violence. Yes, Park admitted, we do. But we learned from our mistakes. We created laws to prevent such things from happening again. We punish those who commit crimes against civilians. We protect the innocent, even when it costs us victory. The holographic displays showed one final image. It was recent, taken just weeks ago. It showed Zephyrian cities, where bodies lay in the streets, victims of the plague. But it also showed something else. Zephyrian officials still living in luxury while their people died. Even now, Dr. Choi said quietly, your leaders save medicine for themselves, while common citizens suffer. Even facing extinction, your empire cannot change. The room fell silent. Kethver sat alone, surrounded by the evidence of his people's crimes, knowing that his species' fate now rested in the hands of those they had wronged most terribly. 3 days later, Kethver sat in a small, windowless room, deep inside the Federation building. The walls were plain white metal, and the only furniture was a simple table, with 2 chairs. He had not slept well since the presentation of evidence. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the victims his people had created. The door opened, and Chairman Park entered, followed by 5 other humans. Kethver recognized some of them from the assembly hall, but others were new. They sat across from him at the table, their faces serious and calm. Ambassador Park began. We have reached a decision about your request for medical aid. Kethver leaned forward eagerly. You will help us. Yes, said Dr. Lee Dong-wook. We have developed a cure for the plague affecting your people. Our medical teams can produce enough antiviral medicine to save your entire population within 6 months. Relief flooded through the ambassador's body. His skin began to return to its normal silver color. Thank you. Thank you so much. Whatever payment you require, we will provide it. Payment is not the correct word, said Defense Minister Kim Soo-jin coldly. Justice is Judge Lim. Hyjin opened a thick folder on the table. The Terran Federation will provide the cure, but only under specific conditions. These conditions are not negotiable. Cuthbert's relief began to turn into worry. What conditions? First, Judge Lim read from the document. Complete disarmament of all Zephyrian military forces. Every weapon, every warship, every piece of military equipment must be surrendered to human oversight within 1 year. That is impossible, Cuthbert said quickly. We need our military to maintain order on our worlds. General Bei Jinsu smiled, but it was not a kind smile. Human peacekeeping forces will maintain order. Your military has proven it cannot be trusted with such responsibility. Second, Judge Lim continued, all Zephyrian government officials who held positions of authority during the period of expansion must face trial for war crimes. This includes your emperor, his family, all military commanders, and all colonial administrators. Cuthbert's eyes went wide. You cannot try our emperor. He is the divine ruler of our people. Your divine ruler will sit in a courtroom like any other criminal, said Prosecutor Jang Manesio, through a video screen on the wall. He will answer for every order he gave, every death he caused, every world he destroyed. The ambassador stood up from his chair. This is not medical aid. This is conquest. Sit down, General Bei said quietly. The command was soft, but Cuthbert felt the threat behind it. He sat. Judge Lim turned to the next page. Third, all former Zephyrian territories will be governed by councils composed of their original inhabitants. The beings your empire enslaved, displaced, or oppressed will now have authority over reconstruction efforts. You mean ... double quotes. Cuthbert's voice was barely a whisper. We mean, said Chairman Park, that your former slaves will become your supervisors. The families you separated will decide how your worlds are rebuilt. The children who survived your experiments will have authority over your scientists. Dr. Han So-young leaned forward. Every surviving victim of Zephyrian oppression will be given the power to demand direct reparations from those who harmed them. Your people will work under their direction, following their orders, until all debts are paid. Fourth, Judge Lim, read on. All Zephyrian technology, scientific research, and historical records must be shared with the galactic community. No secrets, no hidden weapons, no classified information. And fifth, she concluded, the Zephyrian Empire, as a political entity, will cease to exist. Your worlds will become independent territories under human protection, until such time as they can govern themselves peacefully. Cuthbert stared at the humans across the table. You are asking us to destroy everything we are. No, said Chairman Park. We are asking you to become something better than what you were. What if we refuse? The ambassador asked. General Bei answered. Then your people die from the plague. Every single one of them. And the galaxy becomes a safer place. But you are supposed to be the good ones, Cuthbert said desperately. You are supposed to be better than us. We are better than you, replied Defense Minister Kim. That is why we are offering you a choice. Your empire would have simply let us die. We are giving you the chance to live, but only if you accept justice. Dr. Lee placed a small vial on the table. The liquid inside glowed with a soft blue light. This contains enough medicine to treat 1,000 people. We can make millions more doses. Your children could be healthy again within weeks. All you have to do, said Judge Lim, is sign this agreement. Cuthbert looked at the document in front of him. It was written in both human script and Zephyrian symbols. Every word was clear and simple. There were no hidden meanings or trick phrases. It was exactly what the humans had said it was. The complete transformation of his civilization. How long do I have to decide? He asked. Your latest reports indicate that the plague is spreading faster, Dr. Han said matter-of-factly. Your people have perhaps 72 hours before the death rate becomes impossible to reverse. Even with our medicine. 72 hours to save your entire species, Chairman Park added. Or 72 hours to watch them all die while holding on to your pride. Cuthbert stared at the glowing vial of medicine. Inside that small container was the salvation of everyone he had ever known. but the price was everything his people had built over thousands of years. "I need to contact my government," he said finally. "Of course," Park replied. "But remember, Ambassador, time is running out. For all of your people." As the humans left the room, Kethfer remained alone with the medicine and the contract. Knowing that the next few hours would determine whether the Zephyrian Empire would end with extinction or transformation, the choice was theirs to make. 6 months later, the first human medical ships appeared in the skies above Zephyria, but they were not alone. Alongside the white vessels marked with red medical crosses came hundreds of other ships. These carried passengers that made every Zephyrian on the planet stop and stare in shock. Admiral Ko Young-soo watched from the bridge of his flagship as the refugee ships landed in the capital city's main plaza. The beings stepping out onto Zephyrian soil had not set foot on this world for decades, some for over a century. They were the survivors, humans, Arcturians, Vespans, and dozens of other species who had once been slaves, prisoners, or test subjects of the Zephyrian Empire. But now, they returned as something entirely different. They wore the clean uniforms of administrators, judges, and reconstruction supervisors. They carried tablets and documents instead of chains. They walked with their heads held high instead of bowed in fear. Captain Nam Ji-hoon led a squad of human peacekeepers through the Imperial Palace. The building that had once been the center of galactic terror was now strangely quiet. Servants and guards had abandoned their posts when they learned what was coming. Only Emperor Vextar remained, sitting alone on his throne of black crystal. "Your Imperial Majesty," Captain Nam said politely, "you are under arrest for crimes against sentient life." The Emperor was old, much older than he appeared. His species could live for thousands of years, and Vextar had ruled for 8 centuries. He had personally ordered the destruction of more worlds than any being in galactic history. Now he looked small and frail, sitting in his oversized throne. "I am the divine ruler of the Zephyrian people," he said weakly. "You cannot arrest a god. Watch us," replied Captain Nam. As the Emperor was led away in simple restraints, crowds of Zephyrians watched from the streets. Some wept, others cheered. Many simply stood in shocked silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. Dr. Oh Sungwon worked in the medical center that had been set up in the former slave market district. The irony was not lost on him. He was saving the lives of Zephyrians in the same building where their people had once sold other species like animals. But he did his job without complaint, treating both the plague victims and the elderly survivors, who had returned to reclaim their homes. "Doctor," called Nurse Park Ji-young, "we have another patient who refuses treatment." Dr. Oh sighed and walked to the bed, where a young Zephyrian lay dying from the plague. The patient's eyes were filled with hate as he looked at the human doctor. "I will not be saved by an inferior species," the young Zephyrian whispered. "That is your choice," Dr. O replied calmly. "But your daughter in the next bed has already accepted treatment. She will live to see tomorrow because she chose life over pride." The patient looked over at his child, who was already showing signs of recovery after receiving the human medicine. Slowly, he extended his arm for the injection. In the main courthouse, translator Shin Dae-young worked around the clock to ensure perfect communication between all species involved in the trials. She had never been busier in her life. The courthouse ran sessions 24 hours a day, with judges, prosecutors, witnesses, and defendants from across the galaxy. General Caxelin, who had commanded the fleet that destroyed the Helix colony, sat in the defendant's chair as survivors testified against him. The general had once been feared throughout the galaxy for his cruelty. Now he listened in silence as a human woman described watching her children die in the bombardment he had ordered. "I do not ask for your forgiveness," the woman said to him. "I ask only that you understand the pain you caused and that you spend the rest of your life working to repair it." Field Coordinator An Mi-young filed her daily report back to Earth. The reconstruction was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Former slaves were showing remarkable restraint in their new positions of authority. Instead of seeking revenge, most focused on building systems that would prevent future atrocities. The Arcturian survivors have established schools in their former prison camps, she wrote. They are teaching both their own children and young Zephyrians together. The Vespon refugees have turned their old slave quarters into medical clinics, open to all species. But not everything was peaceful. Some Zephyrians could not accept their new reality. They formed small rebel groups and attacked reconstruction sites. Human peacekeepers dealt with these incidents quickly and firmly, but always within the bounds of law. Ambassador Cathfer, now stripped of his title and rank, worked in a refugee camp on the outskirts of the capital. His job was simple. He cleaned latrines and distributed food under the supervision of beings his people had once oppressed. It was humbling work, but he did it without complaint. His supervisor was an elderly human woman named Mrs. Lee, who had survived 3 years in a Zephyrian prison camp. She was firm but fair with him, treating him as she would any other worker. "Why do you not hate me?" Cathfer asked her one day as they cleaned medical supplies together. "Hate takes too much energy," she replied. "I would rather spend my time building something good than destroying something bad." As the months passed, something unexpected began to happen. Young Zephyrians, who had grown up hearing stories of their empire's glory, began to work alongside the beings their ancestors had wronged. They learned new ways of thinking, new ways of living, new ways of solving problems without violence. The transformation was slow and sometimes painful, but it was. Real justice was not just being served, it was being learned, one day at a time, one person at a time, one choice at a time. 5 years had passed since the first human ships arrived at Zephyria. The world looked completely different now. Where once stood monuments celebrating conquest and domination, beautiful gardens grew in memory of those who had suffered. Where prison camps had held millions of slaves. Schools and hospitals now served beings of all species equally. Director Park Kyung walked through the memorial gardens with Cathfer on a warm spring morning. The former ambassador had changed greatly over the years. His once proud bearing had been replaced by something gentler and more thoughtful. He moved slowly among the memorial stones, reading names in dozens of different languages. "Do you ever regret it?" Park asked him, as they stopped beside a fountain dedicated to the children of Kepler-44 to B. Keth. Single quotes. VAR was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it took the near extinction of my people for us to learn how to be decent, but I do not regret the changes your people forced upon us." They walked past a group of children playing together in the garden. Human children laughed and ran alongside young Zephyrians, Arcturians, and Vespans. To them, the old hatred between species was just history from books. They had grown up in a world where cooperation was normal and violence was rare. Dr. Ruhain watched the children from her office window in the medical center. She had been working on Zephyria for 3 years now, leading the multi-species medical alliance that had grown from the original crisis. The plague was long gone, but the doctors had stayed to help build a healthcare system that served everyone equally. Doctor called her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Veltar, who had lost his parents to the plague. "The new batch of medical students has arrived from Earth." "Good," she replied. "Make sure they understand that they will be learning from teachers of all species here. The Arcturians have the best surgical techniques in the galaxy, and the Vespans understand genetics better than anyone." In the courthouse, the war crimes trials had finally ended. The last of the major war criminals had been sentenced to life in prison, where they would spend their remaining years doing community service under careful supervision. Emperor Vextar had died in custody 2 years earlier, but not before publicly admitting his crimes and asking forgiveness from his victims. Peace Coordinator Seo Hyan Wu reviewed the latest reports from across the former empire. The transformation had spread far beyond Zephyria itself. On every former Zephyrian world, similar changes were taking place. Former slaves had become leaders, former oppressors had become workers, and former enemies had become neighbors. The crime rate on New Centauri has dropped to the lowest levels in recorded history, he noted in his report to Earth. The Arcturian-led government there has established a justice system based on rehabilitation rather than punishment. Even former Zephyrian soldiers are volunteering to help rebuild the communities they once destroyed. But the most remarkable change was happening in the younger generation. Zephyrians, who had grown up during the Reconstruction, did not think like their parents. They had learned to see other species as equals, to solve problems through discussion rather than force, and to take responsibility for their actions. Cultural liaison Moon Jamin had overseen the construction of the great monument in the central plaza. It was made from materials donated by every species in the galaxy, and its design had been chosen through a democratic vote involving beings from hundreds of worlds. The inscription was carved in over 1,000 languages, ensuring that everyone could read and understand its message. Cuthbert stopped in front of the monument every day on his way to work. He had a new job now. He taught history at the integrated school, helping young beings of all species understand the mistakes of the past so they would not repeat them. When mercy was requested, justice was delivered, he read aloud, as he did every morning. When justice was complete, mercy was earned. His students often asked him what the inscription meant. He would tell them about the old days, when his people ruled through fear and violence. He would explain how the humans could have chosen revenge, but instead chose something much more difficult. They chose to force the Zephyrians to become better than they had been. Your people did not just save our lives, he told Park, as they continued their walk through the gardens. You saved our souls. Park smiled slightly. We did not save anything. You chose to change. We simply made sure you had no other choice. As the twin suns set over the reformed world, families of all species gathered in the parks and plazas for the evening meal. Former slaves sat beside former masters. Former enemies shared food and stories. Former victims played with the children of their former oppressors. It had not been easy. The transformation had taken years of hard work, difficult conversations, and sometimes painful admissions of guilt. But it had been worth it. The galaxy was safer now, more peaceful, more just. Dr. Rue looked out at the sunset and thought about her grandfather, who had died in a Zephyrian prison camp 70 years earlier. He would have been amazed to see Zephyrian children learning to heal instead of hurt, to build instead of destroy, to protect instead of conquer. Grandfather, she whispered to the evening breeze, justice was served. And in serving justice, we found mercy. The inscription on the monument was simple, but it contained a profound truth. Humanity had kept their promise. They had delivered exactly what the Zephyrians had asked for. But they had delivered mercy wrapped in justice, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy that true strength lay not in the power to destroy one's enemies, but in the wisdom to transform them into friends.